All right. So welcome everyone to our panel. We are the movement bringing digital well-being and responsible tech to your schools. We have 5 excellent panelists here for you today. And we're just going to do some brief introductions with them. So starting off, Shivani, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. Hey guys, my name is Shivani and I am a 12th grade student from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm currently the Director of Programs and Partnerships on Lookup's Team Leadership Council, where I work to promote the digital wellness and ethical tech movement. I primarily work on mobilizing youth through our Teen Toolkit and our Disconnect to Reconnect podcast. I'm also the president of a local FBLA chapter, or Future Business Leaders of America, which makes me very passionate about the innovation side of public-private solutions to a lot of our social media crises.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, moving on, Vinaya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Adin. Hi, I'm Vinaya. I'm a high school junior at Ursuline Academy. In affiliation with Lookup, I am the co-chair along with Adin on Lookup's Team Leadership Council. I am an old intern, but also a founding member of Lookup India. Apart from that, I started the Heads Up campaign with Diana, and I'm also an avid coder. So in my free time, I'm out coding.
Thank you so much. All right, Danielle.
Hi everyone, my name is Danielle. I am a college freshman at the University of California, Berkeley, and when I was in high school, I was also a co-founder of the Elephant in the Room Project Lead, which began as a student-led movement to promote mental health and kind of by the end of my high school career broadened into this mission of wellness in general. So yeah, I'm super excited to be here today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. All right, Deanna.
Hi everyone, my name is Deanna and I'm a junior at Lake Forest Academy and a recent transfer from Deerfield Academy. And while I was at Deerfield, I created the first Heads Up Club, which focused on getting teens off their phones and being more aware. And then we hosted competitions and had a lot of info sessions for the teens at the school. And then also after I had this experience, I started the Heads Up campaign with Vinaya, where we reach out to schools nationwide and try to get other schools to create a club like how we did at Deerfield. And then also with Lookup, I'm also part of the Teen Leadership Club.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Mahika, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, of course. So my name is Mahika. I'm a high school junior at West Windsor-Plainsboro High School North. I created an organization called the Phone Foundation, which is an organization that allows computer science to be accessible to anyone, increasing technology regardless of someone's socioeconomics, status, age, or gender, allowing the Coding Foundation to foster a love of coding technology for students in a fun and engaging manner. As a child, I didn't have an opportunity to learn about computer science, so with this organization, I've been able to spread over thousands of individuals to learn about computer science. I'm also the Chief Financial Officer at Leaderfield, empowering myself to encourage other students to learn about leadership abilities and public speaking and increasing the field of technology as well.
Excellent. So we obviously have an awesome panel for you guys here today. Just like a little bit of introduction, I mean, in addition to the strong girl power that we have on this panel, we are all also Gen Zers, or as some people call us, Zoomers. So we have an extremely profound experience, not only with technology, but also social media as it's being increasingly integrated, not only into our schools, but also into our lives. So we are just going to share some solutions that we've seen and some goals for the future so that we can help shape, the future of the social media industry and also youth interaction with technology. So we're going to jump off with our first question. In what ways has your school embraced teaching healthy online habits, and what are some areas for growth? So Shivani, would you like to tackle this question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I actually have a very interesting perspective on this question, primarily because there are no ways in which my school has embraced teaching healthy online habits. I think that there is definitely a discrepancy among schools around the United States when it comes to the kind of curriculum that we have in this field. One thing is around 90% of the students in this nation attend public schools, and I feel like a lot of them are not putting emphasis on this as something that is important. We still have sex ed that's being taught by gym teachers. So we're a little behind on the whole spectrum of perspective in that way. So I think that's definitely a concern. I think in terms of areas for growth, at this point, it is really difficult to integrate a curriculum directly into the learning environment of a lot of schools. And so I think one of the best ways for growth is to have students, much like a lot of the students here, take that initiative and kind of start a chapter of the school club. I know a lot of people here are going to be talking about that. We have heads up clubs. There's also Lookup affiliates. And so there's a lot of ways that students can take that initiative to bring the movement into our school. And I think this is one of those times where, in terms for growth, it is the young people that are taking the initiative.
Those are some excellent points. All right, Deanna, do you want to share some thoughts you have on this?
Yeah, sure. So while I was at Deerfield Academy, we had a no phone policy, and it was a norm to not be on your phone when I went there my freshman year. But unfortunately, because of COVID, all the teachers had more leniency towards this rule. So screen time shot right back up, and all the students went back to being on their phones, and it was not as good of a community as it was before. So that's what inspired me to create the Heads Up Club, like how I did. And pretty much what I was trying to create is this norm that we had before, where being on your phone was something that was rude if you're around your peers, and only being on your phone when you're in your dorm. And this is pretty much the rule we put in place, where like you're only on your phone when you're in your dorm. And then also it's more of like a peer pressure, where it's a good peer pressure where your peers are actually saying like to get off your phone when you're around them, because I feel like a lot of students respect their peers more than like adults if they tell them to do that, because they're like, oh, my friend is telling me that I should get off. So that's one thing that we focused on, is trying to get your peers and hold that accountability for them.
Those are some excellent points. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to move on to our next question. Just like from your perspective as a teen, why do you think it's important for schools to increasingly focus on students' digital well-being and mental health? Vinaya, do you want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, of course. So the way that I look at it is that mental health is directly equal to productivity, right? If you are having a good day, it's more likely that you'll get some more assignments done rather than a bad day. Because when you're on that bad day, it's like you want to go to that social pacifier, you want to go to your social media, and then it just all goes downhill. So I think it's really important for schools to understand this and to realize how can they actually help us through this process. Because if they focus on that core issue and say, here's where the problem is and here how we're going to help, they're going to see this tremendous uptrend of all these students turning in stuff on time, like all these amazing grades. And I don't know about you guys, but personally for me, when the pandemic hit, my grades went sinking, and it's a little embarrassing, but it's true. And now I'm slowly working my way back up, but I feel like they can just help by like having this space for people to go and talk to them, and just have a more of an open mindset. So that's why I think it's important for like schools to focus on that core issue.
Great. Deanna, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I personally think that this should be one of the most discussed and worked on topics around the world, around schools specifically, because it's one that affects us like our entire lives. And this, we're never going to stop using our phones, and we should just learn to use our phones in correct and healthy ways, because technology is only going to become more advanced, and we as teens growing up in this environment need to learn how to control technology rather than have technology control us, because we can see in many kids and teens today that if we allow technology to control us, and we don't like figure out how to learn to use technology for good, then it will affect us in really bad ways. And this is one of the main reasons why mental illness is often linked with phone usage, and it's just something that needs to be addressed and taught in schools today.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, it definitely really is an opportunity that's lost in schools to kind of teach teens how to self-regulate, just because it really is a very individualized response to technology, where some parents decide to enforce some regulations on their kids, with like screen times or limiting what sites they can access, whereas other parents don't. And just having kind of a more unified response would be really beneficial to just increasing, generational technological literacy. Shivani, do you want to add to our discussion?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to add a quick thing in. I think one of the things related to digital well-being and mental health that schools should emphasize is appropriate coping mechanisms. I feel like a lot of people, they turn to social media as kind of a distractor or coping mechanism from things that go on in their personal or school lives. And I think that, a lot of different schools might address that there is a problem with that, but I feel like what we need right now, especially with a lot of students, is concrete ways to handle that. And I think that would be beneficial to a lot of young people.
And Shivani, if you wouldn't mind me asking, like, what are some like coping mechanisms that you would recommend, like, as opposed to like using social media as like a vice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, within that, for me particularly, what I did was, because social media became a habit, I had this trigger and action cycle that I kind of looked at. So whenever I leaned towards social media or, unproductive use of technology, it was because of a particular emotional reaction. And for me, it was when I was overwhelmed. And so what I did was I mapped that cycle a little bit in my head, right? So when I'm overwhelmed, that's the trigger, and the action associated with that is mindless scrolling, for example. And so what I did was I worked on changing the action that is associated with that particular trigger. So swapping out the scrolling, I put in reading for a little bit. And so that was, I was still unproductive, but what I was doing was a little bit healthier for me.
Well, and I don't know if I would say that reading is necessarily unproductive. It provides for at least mental stimulation, something that you don't really receive when you're just kind of like playing into the hands of the algorithm. All right, Danielle, did you want to add something?
Yeah, definitely. I think kind of echoing what Shivani said about like just developing healthier coping mechanisms. I think the way that schools approach digital well-being is very interesting because they do it on a very preventive kind of aspect where they're saying, oh, this is how you prevent cyberbullying, or you should limit your time more. But I think in the world that we are today, it's kind of impossible to do that. And so kind of just like flipping that switch a little bit is just approaching digital well-being as a way of being present, because we're not going to get rid of how prevalent technology is within society. And so I think the way to move forward is just to think about how can we use technology to be more present in life. And I think that's something that we really witnessed during the pandemic, kind of just like how the capabilities and potential that technology has to connect everyone. I would not be talking to you guys today if like that didn't exist. And so just applying that mindset to mental health, and what Shivani said about just developing, instead of just finding ways to suppress your emotions, finding ways to be present in your life. And so I think it's important to apply that to schools, just to find that connection, because I think it has a lot of potential.
Awesome, thank you so much. All right, well, we have some amazing speakers here today, and they are all very invested in just like digital well-being and responsible technology, as a whole. But just because you are digital well-being advocates, are there any like obstacles you guys have had to experience, maybe school or social related? And how did you overcome them? So Vinaya, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the biggest obstacles I face is listening to myself. I know that all the stuff I do is weird. Like, how do I explain this? I know that what I'm doing is wrong, but yet I still unconsciously do it. And to give you a little bit more context, my screen time is still 3 hours, and it's not ideal. It's a big decrease from the 10 hours I had at the start of the pandemic, but it's still not ideal. I still struggle to hide my self-view. Our executive director here at Lookup talked to us about how we are so anxious about not being able to see ourselves on our screen, yet I still find it so difficult to hide myself. Or even if I'm on TikTok, I'll find myself thinking, oh, I'm feeding the algorithm, yet don't care. Like, I want to see that next video. And so all of this are obstacles that I face. And how I overcome it is reaching out to friends and family. I'll be like, okay, set the screen time password for me, but don't let me know what it is, because I'll come and ask you. I will want that 15 minutes. I'll come up with 500 million reasons of why I should get those 15 minutes of extra TikTok time, but don't give it to me. So those are the things that it's like an obstacle, yet I'm still working on it. Like, I don't think there's a single digital wellness advocate who's 100% perfect and is completely like, if you watch The Social Dilemma, you see experts saying themselves, I'm addicted to Pinterest, I'm addicted to Gmail. So it's all a work in progress, but yeah, that's just my personal obstacle.
And do you have any, well, I mean, your ability to self-regulate is very inspiring, but do you have any tips for other people who are trying to get to that point where they can be setting boundaries for themselves?
I think the number one thing is turn off your notifications. The first time I watched The Social Dilemma a year back, I completely switched off notifications for Instagram, Snapchat, and TikTok. I watched it a few days back and I turned off notifications for everything. So I feel like that is the first place I would kind of self-regulate. You don't need someone telling you all the time. And I don't like that whole thing. But yeah, I think that really pushed my self-regulation journey into play.
Awesome. And then Deanna, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, Vinay, that was a really great point, because I think that like turning off notifications too, it's like putting the power in your hands rather than putting it in the app's hands, telling you to go on the app rather than you can like being the control factor and you making the choice to go on it when you want to. So that's just something really relatable, but something that I've experienced with creating my own club and getting teens involved is just the problem that a lot of teens don't want to get involved and they don't want to get off their phones. And I encountered this when we had the competition, and a lot of teams didn't want to be in it because they didn't want to be like, oh, I don't want to reduce my screen time because I do a lot of things on my phone. I go on social media. And one way I overcame this is like having an incentive for students. So one way we did this was having fundraisers, getting prizes so that students did want to compete. But then after we did this and they actually realized how much good can come from getting off their phones, they wanted to do it on their own. And tons of students actually ended up like turning off their notifications and reducing screen time after the competition. So just having this incentive in the start, and also just getting a lot of students involved, because once your friend is involved, you'll think it's cool as well and want to get involved. So that's one of the many ways that I found that you can get more students involved that initially wouldn't want to do something like that, or something that they don't think they need to work on.
Yeah, your point of having like a Kickstarter just for like these healthy habits, it's a great point. Mahika.
So primarily, a lot of students go on social media and face that obstacle because of the fear of missing out of a lot of their social media platforms, of visiting their friends, things like that. So it's important to realize that we should stay in the present moment and look at the world around us. For myself, I've had the obstacle of being hours and hours on TikTok, on Instagram, but once I started using my phone for other resources like reading, for doing school homework, for even signing up for clubs and making my own organization, the Coding Foundation, I found out that using social media was actually something that brought me behind. It's something that I utilize my phone for, something to inspire me, because at the end of the day, our technology is used to inspire us and cultivate the world around us. If we're using technology to continuously compare ourselves to other people or resort to other methods of using Instagram, TikTok, things like that, doesn't serve to be that effective. So the ways I overcame that is by resorting to use my technology for other sources that serve to be beneficial to me.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. All right, so this is kind of like on a similar note, but being a teen advocate, it can sometimes be isolating, and there are stigmas like advocacy isn't cool, which can make it kind of difficult to find peers. I know that Deanna, you touched on this, when schools are trying to like incentivize healthy habits, like you look to your friends to see if they're doing it. But basically, just like a question I'd like to pose to the panel is, what are some ways you've found to get others involved in your goals and even to get involved in their own goals? Danielle, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the biggest obstacles that when it comes to like involving teens as advocates in this realm of digital well-being is just like finding the motivation. I definitely know that I'm pretty sure that we can all relate in that when Zoom started, motivation just kind of dropped and we didn't want to, I know Vinaya, you even addressed at the beginning, like your grades just sunk, and I definitely can relate to that. And it's just because it's so much harder to find the motivation when all you have to do is kind of log onto a Zoom screen and there's like, it's this 2D thing that isn't really present in the moment. And so I think one way that you can get teams to be involved, and this is the question that I've been grappling with for the past few weeks, is just increase your presence in media. I think that's one of the things that really defines our generation is this uptake in media and just diverse media and media as a form of advocacy. And so kind of spinning whatever material that you're trying to present and just make it media, because that's going to be, teens look to technology as a form of belonging. And I think that's an innate kind of like beautiful part of ourselves. And so I've been thinking about media and consuming media as like both a form of like power and passivity. And this has a little bit to do with the fact that I want to be a writer. When I say when I grow up, but I'm an adult, and that's kind of terrifying. But I want to be a writer, and I've been questioning like the purpose or like how much meaning writing could have, and whether me putting my work out there is just going to respond in either passivity, which is not what I want, right, or purpose. And so I'm still kind of like convincing myself that media leads to purpose within audience members, but I think fundamentally it's true. So just being engaged in media like is a way where it doesn't force the audience to have as much motivation, maybe if they don't have it, but at least it puts that spark there. And so that's my, I guess, tidbit for getting teams involved.
Yeah, well, I think we can all kind of relate to like that struggle to, like grappling with passivity or purpose with technology. And that was an excellent tidbit. So thank you for adding it. So Vinaya, would you also like to add something?
Yeah, of course. I think it's all about the approach that you take. Now, I touched this a little bit on my previous response, but we're not perfect. Even like Tristan Harris, the Center of Humane Technology's founder, says that he's not perfect. And so you can't take a kind of a mom approach, because that's going to sound condescending and push them further. When I was in 7th grade and my parents saw that I wasn't doing well, yet they were still addicted to their technology, it just pushed me away from that whole realm. So you've got to really take a sense of relatability. You've got to find that sweet spot. I had a few underclassmen, I think sophomores, come and talk to me about it. And the first thing I said is like, look around you right now. Look around in the cafeteria. How many tables can you find where the tables are full, but yet everyone's on their phones? So you kind of got to have that unique approach to that person to get them thinking, because you can't do that thinking for them. Everyone's social media approach is so different because of the algorithm, because it's specifically designed for you. So you kind of have to be mindful of that. So I think the best way is just take that relatability approach, find what's relatable, and then let them do the work. And then you guys can collaborate to find that common goal. That's what I'd say.
Well, and you touched on something with the algorithm there. I mean, it almost seems counterintuitive, because by, specifying things to your likes, theoretically, you should be able to find like communities with people who have like similar interests. But the reality is just that's not the truth, and you're really isolating yourself. So Deanna, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to add to this topic?
Yeah, just one thing I want to touch on is the whole like not cool, what every teen might think about certain movements. Most of the teens that think that it's not cool are the ones that need to be like, are the ones that most need to be in the club and need to work on whatever the movement is. I found that the kids that don't want to get involved are the ones who need it the most. So that's just something I kept in mind, and that motivated me to do it, even when because the way I started my club, I asked tons of students if they wanted to join, and I got a few responses, yes. So then that gained more speed, and then we got more students involved. So once I realized this fact that like once students get involved and they realize this, then they'll realize that it's actually cool. And this whole idea of it not being cool, they'll realize that that was false.
That's an excellent point for like self-motivating. But I mean, what is a way that we can kind of like, get through to these students? Because we don't want to like leave them behind. We want them to be able to have a healthy relationship with technology. So what's kind of like a way that you would recommend we could get through to these students who, contribute to the stigma?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was just gonna make a quick comment as to one thing that worked for me and some of my peers, and that's kind of like a reality check. And so we were like, okay, let's take a look at our screen time, and we did. Okay, that's not bad, 5 hours. Okay, that's like a lot of people spend 5 hours on their phone. We're good. And then the thing is, I'm a big math person, so I was like, okay, if I spent 5 hours a day on my phone every single day for the rest of my life, how much of my life would I've lost? And it's mind-boggling. I did it, okay, X% of my entire adult life is going to be me doing absolutely nothing. And that was just like, it hit me like a truck. And so I think the first thing that would really help other people is problem identification. Because I feel like some people don't want to address that it is a problem. And then another thing is alternatives. I feel like once you have that, hey, this is a problem, well, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do about that. But when you help people, identify what they can do about it, that makes people more involved within our goal.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, like, shocking numbers like that, like seeing what percent of your life that you just like, you miss out on because you're no longer present when like in the moment. That's a great way to just kind of like, kickstart an internal revolution. And then Deanna, did you want a chance to answer this as well?
Something really similar to that. We actually had like a school meeting, and then we called 2 students that wanted to volunteer come up in front of the whole school and say like, okay, like pull out your screen time, and we asked them like, what do you think your screen time is before they looked at it. So something very similar to that, a reality check where they were like, oh, I think it's 3 hours. It was reality 8 hours, and they were like, whoa, in front of the whole school. So then everybody else wanted to check, and that's just something like very similar to what Shivani was saying, is something that we did at our school, and that's what our school wanted to get involved, and also just presentations like that to educate students and see like what are the actual problems of social media.
Yeah, and I mean, intrinsic to that exercise is just realizing, that behavior is wrong. But like Shivani said, you really just need to identify the problem and just realize, oh, it's actually 8 hours as opposed to 3, which is pretty shocking difference. All right, so just taking it back into the context of like, what can schools do for students? Like if you can make one program or lesson mandatory for all students in high schools across the nation, what would it be? So Mahika, do you want to answer this first?
Yes, of course. So I would work on increasing the digital well-being of students by having teachers actually focus on what's the core identification, what's the main root issue of why students are resorting to using technology for hours on end. I know for me, like whenever I get like anxious or whenever I'm worried about something, then I tend to go on my phone and I tend to scroll endlessly hours through social media. But being able to break away from that problem, being able to identify what your problem is and find a solution to it, that's a way that students and schools can be able to identify how to fix the problem around them. So being able to teach that to students from a young age, even in elementary school, even in middle school, in order for students to be able to conquer that strength. So when they get into high school, college, and have a lot of other works around them, they're able to manage their time well without spending endlessly hours on social media. I know for myself, I would have preferred having a class like that.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. All right, Shivani.
Yeah, so kind of related to the digital wellness side of things, if I were to make a class or a lesson, it would be on student skills. And that's like how to study for tests, time management, general advice. And I feel like that kind of hits a root of the problem that is almost in which addiction to social media is a symptom. So I feel like if people I think one of the major reasons why a lot of young students are using a lot of social media is kind of to escape from a lot of the issues that they're currently facing with. And some kind of lesson in student skills that'll help them attack those problems like before they have to resort to social media might be more preventative in that case. And I think that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, referencing like escapism, I mean, that kind of speaks to almost a greater issue of maybe schools shouldn't be like just addressing this in almost like a reactionary manner, but also trying to like address like the core issue. I know this is like a slight divergence from the question, but Danielle, do you maybe want to like address some of like the escapism or like crux of like mental health issues that maybe schools should also be addressing?
Kind of, I have like my own theory about like kind of what the root cause of this escapism is. And that kind of goes along with the previous question about like what can schools like teach or what can they do differently. I looked at that question and I was like, is it possible to just like append the entire education system? But unfortunately not. But kind of how I view mental health and digital well-being is, and this is going to sound a little bit kind of bad at first, but they're both very like selfish problems. And I'm not saying selfish is a bad thing, because we need selfish. We need to take care of ourselves. We need time to like look at ourselves and ask how we can improve, what we can do to make sure that we're doing okay. But at the end of the day, mental illness is this very kind of like self-centered concept where it's about comparison. It's like, what am I not doing well? What are people doing better than me? Like, what is bad about me? And I think the same goes, like, Shivani, what you were talking about with like using social media as an escapism. That's also like you use it to escape, but then it's just kind of furthering the problem, because you look at what everyone is doing and you're saying, this is what they're doing better than me. This is what they're doing that I'm not. And at the end of the day, it always comes back to you. And I think that really has a lot to do with how our education system is structured. I mean, we have some like seniors here, and I can only imagine that you're doing your college applications right now. But the fact that the way that they function is focused on yourself and what you've done, I think that's really harmful. Maybe the intention was to be empowering, to get you involved with things that you're passionate about, but also at 15 or 16 years old, I don't expect anyone to know what they want to be passionate about. And so I think a class that, like I said, I would wish could append the entire system, but a class that would be cool is just kind of like taking a step back and asking students what is something that you can do that you can enjoy and just not for the sake of doing it. And so giving students that space where they can just find something that just lets them be present, whether it's like gardening, whether it's just like engaging with maybe younger students if they're good with little kids or something like that. But yeah, just having a class that can give students a break from the grinding and just like very self-centered way that society functions.
Those were some excellent points. I mean, I know that this isn't totally the most professional like add-on, but there was this one Facebook post that my mom saw, and it was basically saying that today's youth are trying to write their resumes as opposed to their eulogies. And I mean, all of a sudden we're thinking about funerals here, but what I mean is that instead of trying to like build experiences and memories and connections with people, leaving a lasting mark with, I mean, how people will remember you. We're trying to just like build a list that will make us, more attractive applicants for colleges or internships or jobs. And it's really sad to think about, because all of a sudden we have, the incoming of, increasing technology coupled with stress from school. And all of a sudden you have these kids who are no longer trying to engage with stuff that they're passionate about. And so Danielle, you bring up some excellent points. And then Vinaya, do you have any last thoughts you'd like to add to this question?
I just want to amplify what Mahika said about how when she feels anxious, she goes on her phone. Me, after every AP Chem test, I, get a not so great grade. I go on my bed and I say, my life is over, pick up my phone and scroll my life away. That's literally what happens. But also what you said, Adin, about how our life has literally just amounted to what is on our resume. But yeah, I just wanted to say like, that is so important. But to answer your question, just self-coping mechanisms, like what should I do when I get a not so great grade in my AP Chem class? Like, should I read? Like, which I learned that from Shivani. I'm not going to say. She said this at one of our earlier conferences. I've spoken with her before and she mentioned reading. And I said, Shivani's a queen. I'm now going to read. So I literally have started reading because I learned that from Shivani. So yeah, just more self-coping mechanisms. I think that's what schools need to focus on.
Well, obviously, I mean, like we're experiencing lots of stressors at kind of like an accelerated rate. So I mean, you're having kids with like a lower level of maturity dealing with like more intense issues. So something really interesting that you brought up with kind of like in addition to like a student skills kind of program is maybe almost like a Socratic or like discussion, aspect where you get help from other students, because I mean, you are of a similar demographic, you're experiencing similar stressors. So it would be a great opportunity to share like, methods that are working for you, like reading as opposed to using social media. So that's excellent. Okay, so moving on, just to actually like, incite change in schools, how would you recommend that like students would get involved with their school's administration? Mahika, do you want to answer this?
Sure, of course. So primarily, students should be able to contribute their ideas, and maybe schools should even enforce a survey where students can write about how digital overload, how the excessive technology has really impacted them. Especially when last year our school was mostly all virtual. We've been on technology for hours and hours on end, and really it's been hard for students to cut back, especially when people have gone in person and now they're kind of feeling the load of not being on their phone all the time, not being on their computers. So students should be able to communicate that with administration and get involved by talking one-on-one, maybe with their principals, with their guidance counselors, in order to see how we can actually address digital well-being. Because let's be honest, everyone faces the same concerns. So it's something that affects each and every one of us, and the schools should take it firsthand to tackle that by themselves.
That's an excellent point. And I know that personally, so I got involved with this organization called Diversify Our Narrative, which is basically trying to, change the culture around like how American history is presented, not only in textbooks, but also socially. And just encouraging students to really get involved with their school's administration, because that is where you can make, the most lasting forms of change. So all throughout my 4 years in high school, I've been involved with my school's leadership program. And that coupled with Diversify Our Narrative really parlayed into an opportunity for me to serve on my school's faculty equity and diversity task force, where we've been trying to combat issues that primarily BIPOC students and students from underprivileged backgrounds face at our school. Even though it's my majority minority students, there's a disproportionate amount of students who are not receiving the same resources and opportunities that like their white or more affluent counterparts are. So basically, I mean, what I would personally recommend is just reaching out to your school administrators, your instructional vice principal, your assistant vice principals, even your principal, because you'll be surprised how willing they are to really, try to help, because especially with schools, that is a crucial time for students' development. And you see an issue in your community and you should want to fix it. Awesome. So we're gonna, we just have a few more questions. So what are some campaigns and clubs that students could start on campus to create a more mindful school environment? So Vinaya or Deanna, do you want to start with this?
Yeah, sure. So Vinaya and I started the Heads Up campaign, and this is pretty much trying to go off the Heads Up Club and create clubs or campaigns at schools around the nation, just like that. And pretty much what it has is different templates that can recommend possible activities you can do with the club that you create or campaign. Then also how to create a board, because many students that want to create a club but don't know how to, we have templates to help them do that, and just how to get involved in this topic, as well as like different outreach and different people they can reach out to if they would like to have a guest speaker come to their school, things like that. And I'll let Vinaya talk more into detail about Heads Up campaign.
Yeah, so we currently have a lot of schools engaging in various different ways. It's all about, so we have this massive problem, but I think the best way to solve it is very locally, because what works for one region will not work for the other region. So we have people engaging in clubs because sometimes their student body is more engaged in those kind of club atmospheres. We also have people engaging in campaigns and competitions. So these are our three main things. And so, yeah, I think that this has really opened the eyes of a lot of students, including myself, because, you know, you live and you learn from other advocates and activists. So yeah, definitely, if you guys are interested, feel free to reach out.
Yeah, so basically just reaching out to you, that's how kids can get more info on setting up a heads up club. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for adding that. All right, so we're going to quickly transition. So just, you know, this is a more broad question, but how can young people help shape the future of the social media industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to jump in on this. This is something that I'm really passionate about. I think, as everyone mentioned before, you know, I love the conversations that we have, and I love the cultural changes that we're working to emit. But I'm also very passionate about the concrete and algorithmic innovation that Gen Z can do. As a group of people who've grown up around social media, we have a very strong understanding of how these algorithms work and kind of the biases that they create, you know, with misinformation and the amplification of emotionally charged content. All of that kind of comes together to build up the identity of young people. And as someone who has been exposed to that for a very long time, I'm a huge advocate for innovation. In that sense, you know, finding public-private solutions. Everyone in this room, a lot of people in this entire country, you know, these are going to be our new business leaders, our new legislators, our new lawyers, our new judges, like the people who have the ability to influence industry, software engineers, you know. And so I think some of the things that we should think about, one of which is algorithms with different forms and designs of content pushing that are not based on algorithmic amplification. In the business side of it, which is kind of what I'm more involved in, that's kind of like reevaluating our business models and pricing models. Now, you know, Facebook, for example, 98% of its revenue comes from ads, and that's surveillance advertising that's pushing revenue and creating a biased skew as to which locations around the world receive what kind of information. And so we're being manipulated to think about things in different ways. And by rethinking pricing models, some people have tapped into subscription models. Other people have done, you know, coins or katas as a way to collect things rather than quantify things through following. And so I also think that niche-based platforms is another thing that we can tap into. So there's a lot of ways that we can go about this. And what I would encourage a lot of our future thinkers to do is grab a whiteboard. That's what I do. I grab a whiteboard and I write down a bunch of stuff that I know about this. I'm like, what if I change this? Or what if we change that? Or, you know, I'll look through like GitHub and I'll see, okay, what kind of, you know, code is around something like this? What can we do to modify that? And I think once people start to tap into this and think about that, we can start influencing the next generation of ventures.
Awesome. So we only have 2 more minutes left in our panel. So I think we're just going to move on to some last thoughts. Thank you for your recommendation, Shivani, with the whiteboard. I mean, it really seems simple, but it really is so effective. So basically, just for the rest of the panelists, we're going to go around and then just state one goal that you have for the future, or some like really important topic that you've noticed in the context of like bringing responsible tech to schools or trying to incorporate digital well-being in schools. So Danielle, do you want to start us off with our last thoughts?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, even if it does have negative effects, students are drawn to social media and technology because they want to share with each other, with the world, just with themselves. Maybe they're just like trying to find some form of honesty or just a form of genuinity. And so I think that's something that we can't overlook. And so in future efforts to kind of like amplify technology and amplify well-being, just focusing on that, just encouraging to have students' voices heard. And eventually we will reach the point where it's a positive culture.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Deanna.
Yeah, sure. Just something that I think relates to all the questions we were talking about, just self-accountability and just you being the one, like you can start like a club. You can start a movement at your own school right now if you really wanted to. You can start right now by turning off your notifications. It's all about you. Like, it's all in your hands. And I think that once people realize this, then it can make a real change in their lives. And this is something that I want to emphasize now, like now that we're towards the end of the call, and that overall, like, phones do bring us closer to people far away, but farther from those next to us. So like once we start realizing that, then that's when we'll start making a change in the world.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mahika.
So yeah, really adding on to Danielle and Deanna, talking about how trying to find your own way to bring a change to society, making sure to identify what exactly does social media help you. Because if you identify like how social media, like what is your reliance on social media, how you like social media, then you can find other ways to rely on social media, to rely on your own aspects. So if social media is just sense of motivation, maybe you can make your own vision board of motivation of what you aim to do for your future. Starting with your self-accountability, like Deanna said, and finding your own way to develop your own future.
Beautiful response. All right, and then to finish us off, Vinaya.
So looking at goals, I have this goal to make the world a kinder place. I think social media has made us really cruel and we don't realize it, but I think that it has. So, I mean, one step at a time, you know, do you have that opportunity to talk bad about that person, but are you going to, kind of moment. So I think that's my goal. I'm working towards it, but we'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to all of our panelists for this excellent session. If you have any further questions, attendees, you can find our contact info on the HOVA app. But thank you so much for attending, and we will wrap it up right here. All right. Thank you for joining us. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.